He'll be here in a minute, if less. So that's our roll call. Go to the open forum. Has anyone received anything from anyone for public forum? Hearing nothing and having no one present, then we will close the open forum and move on to the consent agenda. Perfect timing, Craig. Consent agenda has a typical 3 items, no extra items. That is this meeting's agenda. So now is the time to add anything, if there's anything to be added. Meeting minutes from the previous meeting and the approval or payment of bills. So unless someone would like to pull something for a conversation, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion.
He would so move.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Second for that motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call to a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Wonderful. Moving on to ordinance 2021-02. So this is the same language that we voted on last meeting for the repealing of our tobacco regulations to then use the county's tobacco regulations for our purposes and to have them hold the licenses. So with, unless someone has some discussion about this, I would entertain a motion for ordinance 2021-02, second reading.
Were we going, I thought we were going to find out what the county was doing.
What they're actual.
Did they? That's what we asked for.
Yeah. Did you not get that?
Did it come in an email that I didn't see?
Um,
I apologize if that's the...
I don't know if I saw anything come through.
You did?
I don't know if I did.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think I
Did we
did.
get it?
Looking. Would it have come from?
I don't have the county's attachment on this machine, so I'll have to go back to my office to do that.
Do we want to table this for?
Yeah, we can push
for
it to next
discussion?
meeting. We got plenty of time.
We can also just push it to the conversation after the City Hall Liquor Store conversation, or we can move it to the next meeting. What do you think?
Craig, any thoughts?
That's fine if you want.
Or are you good with it and you don't?
I believe as part of the process, the county has to, is communicating with the businesses within the city limit that sell tobacco, right? Or are they
Well,
going to?
we
And
did,
then-
actually.
We did? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in general, I mean, is everyone okay? I don't even know what the county's doing, or if it's different.
I know it's the Tobacco 21 model, and
Yeah.
that a lot of the distribution, if you're above 21, doesn't change at all. So that's my, nuts and bolts.
I think, though,
So-
it's quite a bit different than our existing rules, because we really don't have anything about it other than you need to get a license from us and provide us with some information.
Sure.
And they have a lot of rules in their ordinance, so.
Can we just take a look then?
Yeah, let's just wait.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Okay. Wonder if you can find it really fast here.
Well, even if you find it, it's not something you want to look over in 5 minutes.
That's a good point.
No, because they picked out the things that they wanted from Tobacco 21. They didn't do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
They
It's
didn't
not
take
a
it
broad-
wholesale, they took parts of it.
All right, so we'll get that before the next meeting then, so we have time to review it. Cool.
Okay.
Great, well, we'll move on then. So we have in front of us, in the packet, we have a pretty thorough, I would assume, I say it's pretty thorough, summary of the process with which we were entertaining the City Hall Liquor Store redesign. So we have LHB's cover letter and their initial estimations here for an initial building that was kind of like the Cadillac, everybody's using the building, everybody needs a space design. So where we're at right now is what is the appetite of the council to move forward with this project, to not move forward with this project? Are we at a point where we can say, like the design is good, we can move forward, or are we at a point where we say, let's go a little bit back to the drawing board and take a look at what our space needs are? I do believe that, like, where we left this before the COVID-19 pandemic kind of derailed everything was, we had moved to a much, much smaller design than what the original design was, largely because we didn't need to have the office space, and the size of the council chambers was bigger than the county's. And we were like, probably don't need that much space. So those are some questions that I have to entertain. Where are we at with the project itself, with this space itself? And things to be considered would be construction costs, of course. Construction costs are still high. And what are our needs, and how can we meet our needs? So that's the introduction that I have. I think that for this conversation, instead of getting deep into the minutia of like specifically how big each spaces should be, we can stay at more of a 30,000, 20,000 foot view and say, what's the appetite to move forward? In what ways do we want to move forward? Or what additional information do we need to be able to make a decision? So if we look at it from that level, where is everyone at, I guess?
Can I just ask a question? So the, obviously I wasn't here, you all were
Right.
here. Is, when I'm looking at these different iterations here on the back sheet, sort of showing, you know, A, B, C. Now, are these the ones that you guys were actually working from, or were these just like proposed ideas, like here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea?
So, so if you look at the A through E maybe,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Actually, if you go back to page 11,
Starts running through
in the
design.
part that talks about, if you go to, it's actually plan option G, and that came from, so there's not a real correlation. So the McGough proposal is based on C,
Okay,
which is like 15,400. And I think when the original conversation started, we were in this like $4 million ballpark for both facilities, so public restrooms, city hall, liquor store.
okay.
And a lot of those, if you look through the A through E maybe, showed, like 120 person capacity council chambers. The liquor store square footages throughout this hasn't really changed at
That
all,
seems-
because that
yeah.
seems to be like that's based on the liquor store study that was done
Okay,
on capacity and what types of things, if we brought certain, whatever, spaces or, things into, like what that could do for our potential revenue side of it.
okay.
Right, to increase revenues, like where's that tipping point between just like building something so big that, it's
Yeah.
not gonna be able to support itself, like finding that kind of happy medium, and that's
Yeah.
where this is how I remember it anyways, is the liquor store sizing. And so throughout those, from A
To E.
to E, that stays
Yeah.
constant, and even then, when you get to G, that's basically the same.
Okay.
So, the biggest change in G is that this was, for one, we were at like 5.68, almost 5.7 million is where McGough came in on Plan C, which was, everybody agreed. I think it was pretty much unanimous, wasn't it? That like, that seemed like not just too much money, but too much building for what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, they
Yeah.
walked hand in hand in the conversation that,
Yeah.
whoa, that's a lot of money, and we really don't need that much space for that kind of money.
I think it was actually Plan D that they were working off of.
McGough?
16,200 square feet.
Oh, okay. I thought in one of ours, it says that
16,000.
16,238.
on the McGough proposal on page 2, it says estimate based off option C. That's the only reason I said that.
Yeah.
But you could be right, it could be D that they're
Okay.
referencing. But, so
Yeah.
G is after we got pricing back and had all the input from the council, we came back, I think it was, I don't know if we were still meeting then or if it was a phone meeting or what it was, but said it's too much space.
Yeah, that
We don't
was-
need the partner space anymore because the EDA and chamber have moved elsewhere. And so then LHB gave us option G, which is what's in that right before the McGough packet, part of the
Yeah.
packet.
Okay.
And then we, fully just stopped.
Okay. Yeah, so then looking at, so are you saying, or can I take it that this is kind of where you left and you were kind of settled at this
Well-
option? Or,
Well,
Well, go ahead, Jay. I don't have to talk the whole time.
I mean.
I can.
It's always good to have somebody else talk. The conversation, I don't think wasn't settled. We were moving
Okay.
forward because the number of steps in the process here are, like, there's a great deal of steps in the process for this, for how this gets done. Where we were asking McGough for construction estimates, came as a price-checking exercise before we actually engaged LHB to do construction drawings for us.
okay.
So at this point, we have concepts. We don't have anything that we have agreed on, anything that we understand, like the actual cost of building in today's dollars, and we don't have money invested in construction drawings yet.
Okay.
So what we're looking at is what scope of a building are we talking about? Are we still talking about a building? And what are the needs we need to meet either way?
Okay.
So whether we build a building or not, there are needs that the city has that need to be met. So
Yeah.
how do we proceed with that?
Were you here, Tracy, for all this? I don't remember the.
Not for this, when we were talking about the whole piece of liquor store in City Hall, it was still somewhat location-based, was still part of the conversation, I'm aware. It was still a concept, something like this, because we talked about putting up a building and having the liquor store lease space if it was considered like an anchor tenant, that would make sense. But someone else would develop this. We wouldn't be a developer and a landlord to a bunch of other commercial spaces. I remember that, right?
Were you here when they came in, the only group that responded to the RFP for that?
I've heard about that since, and I did ask for Mike for a little refresher on that. And of course, I'm not, my first initial reaction was, well, if you put out an RFP and you're a city, then they're going to come back and expect and say things like, oh, I want tax abatements, or what, they'll try to get something, because they wouldn't do that to if somebody privately selling, but they would do that to a city.
I mean, I've heard it happen privately too, but it's not,
But
we have the mechanisms already in place to make that happen. The RFP.
With the expectation that a lot of times that is what's happened, so they approach it that way.
Yeah, and the RFP that we got back, correct my memory if I'm wrong with this, but I believe that they were expecting us to give them the property to develop. Is that correct? Or were they
Yeah, but
actually?
that was really not the difficult part.
The difficult
That was
part.
The easy part. The difficult part was the $6 million gap between what it was going to cost and what the building supported with the revenue.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also.
And 4 or 5 stories.
Exactly,
Yeah.
within our 30-foot limit, like, that was really the thing, they wanted an exemption from the 30-foot limit, and it was, yeah, it would have been retail, anchor tenant, rental,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
didn't really catch anyone's fancy terribly well.
Sure.
Right.
So then, I think, and so you talked about the location thing, and I think that was, I think is still an important part of what, it's been discussed, I think that if you look at just the portion of what City Hall and council chambers, like, that isn't a very large space, like, they don't need a lot of space. And the ideas of, if you're gonna do one project, it makes sense to do it all at one time and everything together, but maybe there's another location out of an existing space elsewhere in town that you could actually do the liquor store, so you don't have to try and, the challenge, right, is how do you modify and run the liquor store right, during a process where the current liquor store location is under construction. And there was some work around, I think, like diagrams on how they would cordon stuff off and make it, have it kind of makeshift to make that happen. Whereas if there was another location that was potential, we could buy that, the city could buy that space, move the liquor store there in a relatively smooth transition, and then the city hall could look at going up the hill, up by the maintenance facility, maintenance garage, and then this would just get put up for sale.
And then I think
Not
that-
the building, but the land.
That conversation, I think, ended up, like, we had a hard time with the greatest and best use of the property when that came up for, like, selling this property right here. You know, what is the actual best use for this property? And, you know, at a certain point, if there's, you know, if the money that we could get from selling this property would help pay for the rest of the projects, then, you know, that's not a bad option. I do believe we talked to the liquor store manager, Chris, and he and quite a few people we spoke to believe that the location of the liquor store they were pretty adamant that it be downtown. As far as access and availability, I do believe that, you know, there's a lot of ways that we could make that very profitable and very attractive to people not in this particular space. We're still stuck with the city hall conversation, you know, about where does city hall go? And even in the smallest design that we have here, city hall is still roughly a 3,000 square foot, you know, it's a reasonable sized space, not counting the city the chamber councils. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, it was throwing me off. I was
It's
really
stopped now.
distracted.
Yeah.
For those of you
Okay.
watching at home, there was a car alarm going off, and it was messing with me. Anyway.
It was.
Um,
Well, and that's kind of where I said too, is it, and it's kind of, you started the conversation at this higher level, is, have we really decided what's the best way to deal with this land? The conversation when we moved the city garage up there was, oh gosh, now you took more land out of private hand, and then there's a concern then, and I've always felt, okay, well then does this in true prime commercial spot in town then belong back in private ownership and potential development, whatever someone wants to do? So is that part of the thing we have to think through? I know the where to have liquor store has been a super important one. I personally tend to agree in town, I think would be a good spot, but, you know, I'm whatever to that, but that's just, you know, a personal thing, but I think we can think through. Because I hear again, maybe it's fine to have it at the top of the hill. I don't know. I personally would still prefer that City Hall went up there. It's closer to the rest of the people that you potentially work with. It's across the street from the rest of the electrical stuff, and it gets us out of prime space, because there's no reason for this to be in prime space. Expensive space, too.
So it sounds like we have a couple of conversations to have. One of those conversations is revisiting as a council the location conversation. We do already own land up the hill. We've already discussed the possibility of developing that for City Hall. You know, a design for another conversation would be design conversations about the space that we actually need. As we already commented, the initial designs had a ton of extra space that we wouldn't need. So building a much smaller project would be a lot cheaper, yes. Yeah, it sounds kind of like we're going back to, not a square one conversation, but going back to an earlier time in the conversation, which if as long as we're informed by the work that's already been done, I don't really see a big problem with. But you know, attitudes may have changed, and the construction realities definitely have changed since we started this conversation. So is that kind of what I'm hearing from people about where we need to be for a conversation on this? Because we can prepare information for just about any conversation that we want to have. It's just, I mean, we can even jump into a conversation tonight if we want to. But it's good for us to know what our goals are, where we're at. Because if somebody's starting to talk about how much square footage we have for offices and we don't even know where we're putting the building, those are different conversations.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I suppose if you put it at that level, then we have to, of course, talk about bathrooms.
Well, I mean, in some ways, if you think about, that's the trade-off. If there was another commercial space that could take the liquor store, or that the city could buy it and put the liquor store there, we move City Hall up there, and then this goes on the market and is sold off, then there is even fewer public restrooms in the downtown area, right? We have how far out does sewer go out Broadway? To Boulder Park?
Oh, yeah, we
Oh,
had
I
that
see what you're saying.
conversation,
Yeah.
right?
I think we had, I feel like we had this.
Well, it's
goes all the way to
it's all the
the-
way out to the
to-
Coast Guard.
Oh, yeah.
Coast Guard,
Good
but-
point.
Oh, I thought we ran into problems about
We always run into problems. I mean, you can't dig
Everything's
a
just
hole.
very flat is all.
the
Yeah.
one across from Sydney's. Wasn't that one of the spots we talked about, but there was
Yeah.
problems with water and sewer there? or no?
Well, it would have been complicated to get.
Yeah,
from
I don't think the
main
water and
line.
sewer is as big a problem as the politics of land use would be.
Oh, okay.
Particularly with the conservation easement and.
So it was that. It wasn't water and sewer.
And just the whole unfinished nature of the point in terms of, how's it going to move into its next phase of existence.
Mhm.
But we did talk about locating some, maybe not quite, building, but something nicer than porta potties out in that location.
Yeah, which I still think's a good idea. You can roll out and have more and seasonally and put some back up in your space when you don't need them or whatever. That'd be nice. But it does mean it's one more thing then. Like you
Mhm,
said,
yeah,
we just
and
need to
that's
think through.
rolled up in this conversation, there has to be some kind of a consideration for that when it is, when a decision is made. So understanding that moving City Hall / liquor store out of this particular property would then leave a gap for public restrooms that would have to be filled,
Yeah.
as accounting for expense considerations and such.
Do you remember anything else, Craig, from our conversations?
Yeah, did we miss anything?
No, we I know we had different attitudes about possibly, the possible different location for City Hall.
Yeah.
And then liquor store, there was also some comments made about, I think we already did a feasibility study on different possible pieces of land or locations for it. We went through that. Public restrooms is important.
Yeah.
Whatever we do, we need to address that. I don't think we can tear these out and not replace them somewhere. I think, I think it just boiled down to what this was starting to cost per square foot, and I don't even know what that'd be now, right now,
Yeah.
in like next year's numbers, but
Yeah, it's really hard to say
It-
if those compare.
There's broke out to like 422 or something,
yeah.
425. All spaces being equal.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know, what does everybody think? Like, what does everybody think we should, do we go back to the location? I don't know, round and round we go, you haven't had any input on this at all, because you haven't been involved in any of it. Do you have any, what's your?
Yeah,
I think-
just, I'm hearing the different ideas. Yeah, it kind of makes sense to me to have the offices up there, although it's kind of nice having it down here in downtown where people can walk easily, especially, if you're older like that. And then But liquor store kind of makes sense. We've got the grocery stores down here, and I don't know, it kind of makes sense that it would stay here in a prime location. On the other hand, you know, drawing people up the hill and maybe get more action up there. Somebody goes into the Harbor Light and, you know, and then if Tim does his thing, I mean, that could be a new space for development up there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I can see it both ways.
Well, this sounds awfully familiar, I gotta say.
Yeah.
We've had this conversation before more than one time.
So,
and-
but did you guys, when
Yeah.
we last had the conversation, did you come around to thinking it would be here?
Yes.
The
Okay.
input that we
Okay.
received
Yeah, we
from
kind of went
staff-
back to this spot.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well then I'm not gonna crack.
It was
that
just fine tuning the space
Okay.
usage and how much space we needed or didn't need.
Mhm. And a lot of that came down to what department heads that involved.
Input that
with
they
the
had, yeah.
spaces and you know, what they had to say about the use of the space, and also, if we would've gotten a killer, like really cracking developer come in and say they were willing to develop something amazing in this space, we would've been like, you got it. But we didn't. And the attitude might be different now, but I really don't think it is, because expenses are so high.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So are land values though, too.
that's a good point.
Yeah, and, you know, you can say that, but we've got development going on now downtown. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not ours to worry what someone else wants to do when they buy some land, or to worry if they can afford to do it or not. If they decide to buy it and develop it, then the main thing is, if we went that route, is just to say, can it be sold?
Yeah.
You know, and then.
And can
if-
you put in some public bathrooms when you do it?
Well, no, it doesn't, I mean, that's where you gotta think out of the side of the box. It's not theirs to do, that's us to figure out where they need to be and how we accomplish that. And then we
Mhm.
just have to, what are we willing to let go and solve a different way? Right? Not say we don't do it, because we do need to, but are we too locked into saying it can only be here to have the bathrooms?
Well, and there is that too, if there is the issue of the conservation easement further out down Broadway, but, I mean, I don't know how long has City Hall been here? I mean, long.
Since the 40s?
But, so well after it was platted, obviously.
Yeah.
So this is platted as, you know, probably very similar to going over to that side. right?
Yeah.
So I guess.
It's not
if-
important how it's platted. We can sell any chunk of it
That's
we
my
want.
point. It's
Yeah.
like, we could say, okay, we want to keep 50 feet on that side, right? So we're not keeping 50 feet where the bathrooms currently sit, so there's the parking lot, we own 50 feet, and then somebody's got to figure out what to do with this bathroom in the middle, right? Like, we could move it over there and say like, cool, here you go, this is your space, you know?
Got it.
So thinking outside the box of like that,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean we have to give up entirely on
Mhm.
bathrooms if we decided to put this up for sale, but we then need to figure out what.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of options when it comes to bathrooms that don't necessarily involve a building.
Mhm.
And maybe that's, you know, slightly easier for us to experiment with and try out, rather than spend a whole lot of money on a facility when we're not attaching it to anything else. But I'd like to go back and think about some of the assumptions that we're using to make decisions here. And, you know, Craig talked about some sensitivity to cost, which is clearly a big issue when it comes to a project this size.
Yeah.
But the way we're scoping it out now, I have no idea whether that's more expensive or less expensive. And do we want to know something about that before we go down that road?
We can ask.
The assumption that City Hall benefits from being by the Public Works garage just isn't true. There's really no benefit to being up there.
So you don't
There's
talk
really-
to those people or interact with any of those
All the time.
people?
But,
Okay.
you know, we also talk to the liquor store people, we also talk to the park people, it's not that it's bad for us to be up there, it's
Right.
just, it's not good. We can be anywhere. City Hall really can be anywhere when it talks about our operational needs. When we talk about where people want to come to be, I think it can be anywhere too, but there is some benefit to being here.
The last thing about being here, where there was also a conversation I remember about parking, And I thought, okay, fine, if we're up at the top of the hill, we can have decent parking for a meeting. We aren't taking up downtown parking when we have meetings. And there's less and less reason for people to come and walk down here for anything, especially once we get all of the readings automated. And they can call you or email you about questions or issues. We don't have a lot, I don't think, of action going on. I mean, I've lived in other communities where there's more in the city hall building with a lot more functions and activities going on that don't go on in ours. Maybe something more similar to what our county courthouse accomplishes, which is a lot more services than what we have to provide here, which then to me makes still some sense. Either way, people drive, I hate to tell you this.
They
Oh,
definitely
yeah.
drive.
It's a nice concept to think they can walk downtown, but most of them drive.
So, City Hall can be anywhere, is what we're hearing.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
liquor store, I think
Should be downtown.
Could probably be anywhere.
Like
Would probably
that-
benefit from being downtown.
That is something that, if you want to revisit, we need to go back and look at all the information you used to already make the decision that it should stay downtown, which I think is pretty strong.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So I hope we don't revisit that part of the question. I think we ended up picking this type of model because one building rather than multiple buildings is going to be cheaper. And we didn't have any faith that there was a viable alternative for this space. So.
But I don't, that's where I question, is that our responsibility to somehow, if we, we may not be the ones interested in developing, but somebody else may. I mean, anyone who owns land can worry about that, but if all of a sudden you want to put it for sale.
Well, I'm not worried about it the way I think you're talking about being worried about it. I'm wondering, when we talk about trying to put it back on the tax rolls, and before we do that, we have to buy another piece of private property and take it off the tax rolls, and then wait for someone to come and want to put this one back on the tax rolls. So we're going to have to take at least one step backward before there's any chance to take a step forward. Just some risk involved in that. And then the other
That's
thing
true.
is, just the activity that goes on here is of benefit to the neighborhood. And to take it away, again, I mean, that's the whole idea of, well, what if we put it up on the hill? Would we be able to generate some activity up there? And it's like, well, wait a minute, what did we just do to the activity down here? And
I don't
again, we'd have
understand that.
to.
I'm not tracking on that one. Say it again.
Well, there's some synergies to having the things that go on here next to other things going on. Like
What
it's
things that go on here?
the liquor store, the city hall, activity, meeting space, just having a permanent presence, having the bathrooms here, just a location where things are going on. And if it was instead just a vacant lot, it's not bringing the same level of activity to the neighborhood. So this is the conversation that we had when we talked about location was, well, what are our goals for each of those sites? And what are the ways that doing the building in a different way tries to meet those goals? And I think that's why this was the model that was picked. So if we were going to go back and revisit that question, I think we should go back and talk about that in terms of what the goals are that we're trying to meet with these sites. And would we be able to do that or not? And it's possible things have changed since we originally had that conversation, which was now, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago when we started, probably.
Well, I guess, that's really what I'm saying is you're already worried and feeling it's your, and I don't mean you personally, but it's, the city's responsibility to figure out exactly what will come here if we get rid of it. And I'm saying that is obviously a risk, but it's one that's been happening all around this community. People own land and do or don't put up for sale. And for us to make such a huge long-term decision thinking that no one will come in here and buy this, and it might sit here even for a year or two and think that is just terrible, I don't know if that's like the best logic to take. if there's other more cost-effective ways that still meet some of our other needs. And it can go back and be held in private ownership. It is, I would assume some of this is our prime retail space. And I think we just said there isn't that much action or activity that goes on in City Hall that generates that much people. Liquor store obviously does. I'm still not so sure this is even a, this crowdingness of a one-way street in and out of the liquor store for people unless it comes this way. I don't know if that serves people that well either, nor the unloading and loading possibilities. I don't know. That's the part I struggle with that logic on.
I think it's clear that this property is not a perfect property for the operations that are going on here, as far as access, as far as size, as far as, parking, blah, 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 all those sorts of things.
Well, there's a lot of properties downtown that
Yeah.
lack in parking, and it's just, we have restaurants downtown that don't have parking other than city streets. We have housing or, hotels downtown that don't have parking for, so I mean, it's just, no matter, whatever happens to this property, whether it stays this way or gets developed, parking's gonna be an issue. It always has been an issue unless they provide their own on-site parking, which means you'd be utilizing all of the land,
Mhm.
all the way over to the south edge lot, but,
So
So that's true. So that would make that like a lower priority, then, I would say.
what would be a lower priority?
Because like Craig just said, parking is an issue for everybody, so.
when it's busy,
Yeah.
So
just
where are you
where
just
saying
things
is
is.
lower priority? I'm not tracking you.
So then parking becomes a lower one to me. I'll take back what I just said, because he's true, he's right. Everyone struggles with parking here. So we wouldn't be any better off or worse than anyone else then.
Yeah.
I guess the point I was trying to make is that keeping the liquor store and City Hall here in this property is definitely the low-risk choice. Like, that's like the safe, known quantity. We know everything works here. We know, that we can operate a liquor store in this space. We know that City Hall has a home here. Moving to another place, having an unknown about this property, that is definitely a risk. At the time when we discussed this last, the council did not feel like that risk was a good one to take for the city, because we did not receive enough good faith proposals from developers who are interested in the property. This council, we can entertain different considerations if we want to. I personally think that one of the things we should focus on is what's the cheapest way we can accomplish our goals. Is that one building? Is that two buildings? Is that building? Is that buying? What's the way that we can do this that will meet our goals and will provide us with longevity in a project and also effectiveness. So those are the things I'm concerned about. I think there's lots of ways we can accomplish that. Yeah.
So cost so far kind of rises to the top.
Well, for me.
Well, I think there's something clearly above it, although it's related. We're not moving the liquor store out of downtown. And so far, we haven't really talked about changing the scope of what we want to provide with the liquor store.
Mhm.
And so that seems like the most important. I mean, it's cost, right? Because the reason we're investing in the liquor store is because we think it will return on that
Right.
investment. But it's not cost and the lowest price, it's the best investment.
Yeah.
And as I've mentioned before, I get more concerned about the cost of the liquor store, knowing that changes to liquor laws could be coming, and obviously a lot of other commercial ventures are taking that into account.
What do you mean by that?
Well, which I mentioned before. So the latest one is, and I'm going to say this right, I always say Zups, but is it Zips? I don't know how to
Zoops.
say it. But anyways,
Zoops.
so
Depends on where
their
you're
new
from.
space up in Ely in their old Shopco building now, of course, includes a liquor store. Just like Super Valley does next door, because it's sort of this fake wall, right, that everybody has between their liquor store and their grocery stores. And you know they're doing that in anticipation of those laws changing in the state. And where would that leave us with having a nice, we potentially have competition, which we don't now. Which I still think is worth investing, because I still think if we put in a really good liquor store, we could get return on that and have good customer loyalty, but it would mean we'd have to really put together a nice liquor store, which sounds like we're aiming
That's
towards.
the plan, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
But that said, I would then be a little bit more cost sensitive to how we achieve it, knowing that it could change or be in competition with other retailers in the future.
Yeah,
I mean, that, the most likely fear-based scenario is that there's partial competition, that
Mhm.
wine in grocery stores sort of idea. But there's also the concept of there is no more municipal liquor stores. I mean, we only do it because the state allows it to be done. And there aren't hundreds of cities doing it, there's dozens, so could happen.
Mm-hmm. And we are one of the few that, I don't know how we're doing now, but we were one of the few doing quite well.
We're doing well.
Reading the auditor's reports over the last few years, comparing the different municipal liquor stores.
So liquor store stays downtown, City Hall, question mark? What level are we at for a conversation? Do we want to put, what do we want to put on the table? Do we want to put on the table discussions, like all possible discussions for how we can keep the liquor store downtown? Do we want to put on the discussion a separate building up the hill? Like, what do we want to talk about for all of this? Because it's like, the conversations that we've had previously, it seems like although we covered a lot of good information, is not where we're at right now. If we want to continue to discuss different options, then I believe we should declare what those options are, gather information, and then have a conversation about that when we have appropriate information.
Just one other question. Have there been any other conversations from other parties about what we could be doing with this lot recently? Have anybody approached you with conversations?
Not really, no. I mean, for the entire 20 years I've been here, there's been conversations about what could happen on this property, including some that were potentially serious conversations about real development, but I don't think that there's been any serious conversations from any existing local entities about that for a while.
Recently?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that what has been closest to that is the conversations we've had with the potential partners that would be tenants in here.
Mhm.
And that doesn't seem like it's in the cards in the future, that we would have any tenants.
Yeah, I guess it's a question too. I mean, did you guys have an appetite to be landlords for any other use in a building?
I don't think we've ever been.
Well, we've been the
We were.
landlords
We
the whole
were
time.
at the,
Well, I mean, what
Two-
I'm saying, never interested in pursuing.
I think the EDA
More.
was an entity that we were the most serious about, and they're definitely considered, even in the smallest drawing we've got here. There's enough room for them to function in this building with us. It's an entity that can function in the same space that we're in, kind of back a house with us without there being any conflicts or difficulties. But they've got their own space, so that's not something they need. We've also had some real preliminary conversations with other local entities who need space, but none of them are as good of a fit. And none of them are in the same place in terms of being ready to go.
Mhm.
And it just makes our conversation that much more complicated without any good benefit.
Okay.
Unless we take this idea and step it back 3 or 4 steps and start over on the concept, and then I would recommend that we go back and get some of those partners into the room and start that up again.
I don't personally think we want to be in the rental business. And I don't think it's ever about the actual tenants you're thinking of in the moment. It's the decision if you want to be landlords or not and have space you rent, because they could come and go at any time.
And if you're talking about commercial entities, I completely agree with you. I don't think we're at all equipped to be a good landlord for private entities.
Mhm.
For other public entities, though, there's quite a few of them around here, that there's potential for that.
Okay. And has there been any other, has anybody said anything else they want us, any others that they would view as a service that they want the city to provide?
Do you have an example of something, or
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what you're getting at.
Like a co-working space or
We tried that.
an event space, or, I'm not I'm just wondering if
Mhm.
that come up. I just want to, you're talking about what things do you need to consider?
Mhm.
I just want to, yay or nay to whatever, so.
I haven't heard any conversations about the city having event space or any kind of public venue other than chambers.
When we did this project, the scoping out here of this concept, both of those were certainly talked about.
They were in the early iterations. I mean, you can see, right, that there's several meeting
Yeah.
spaces. Like the lobby itself is,
Mhm.
it's like you come into this space and there's kind of different entities and meeting spaces that could be utilized, and then there's the the council chambers, and then there's City Hall itself, and, so it would create, it would create that kind of hub for all those things, but, the only thing I'd say about, I know right now, the EDA and the chamber are renting a different space, but part of what drove them to rent that space, I think, was the fact that we had this conversation that was started, that we're gonna try and move something forward, right? And they knew that their space was gonna go away here.
You're on the board, you tell me. I don't see the
They
link.
didn't, they didn't go and buy a building
No.
to house, they're just in a rental
They're
situation
renting.
similar to what they were
but
here.
they're paying more than they used to.
Yeah.
I don't know why they left.
Well, I think they left because we were planning on doing
Construction.
a construction project that was
Construction,
gonna,
Were we?
So are you saying
Well,
that you should
we
get in touch
were-
with those entities
I mean,
again and
it
see if
was
they're still interested in
premature,
coming
but-
back to a rental agreement with us or something?
well, I think
personally,
there was
don't-
other issues, right? Like it leaked, the roof leaked on Jim, and there's, it's the whole building. It's why
Yeah.
we're talking about fixing
Right.
City Hall and the liquor store.
And back to the cost consideration, I don't know any partners that this is the best cost option for them, is for us to build a brand-new office space that they can rent from us.
Because we're not gonna charge them $300 a month or whatever we were
Yeah.
charging them before.
Yeah, they'd have to pay their share, and it would be a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to double check all that. Make sure.
Chris always brings up, and I'm pretty sure Johnson's isn't for sale, but Chris, every time we have this conversation with him about the liquor store, Chris is always says, what about Big Dollar? Like, what about that type of situation? And has anybody ever, is there, even though it might not be a near-term thing, but has anybody ever reached out and said, what is your guys' plan as you look to retire for Johnson's? Has anybody asked that question?
Not in a number of years.
Yeah.
Has anybody had a serious conversation about that?
And I don't know what that would be. I have no idea of it, but,
Is that a conversation that we want to entertain? So like,
well.
where I'm at is like, I think we need to identify what we're trying to do. And because right now, we keep going around in circles and we keep coming back to conversations that well, in some ways we've already had, you know, and if we're gonna have the liquor store downtown, we should look at all the options for downtown. That includes Big Dollar, that includes this property. Does that include any other properties? I don't know. You know, like, what are all the opportunities for keeping it down here? What's the cheapest way for us to do that, that meets our goals, that has longevity that we're looking for, that has resaleability if we lose the ability to have a liquor store, like, all that sort of stuff. So, like, if that's what we want to do, we can certainly start those conversations, we can certainly gather that information. If we want to move City Hall out of downtown, then we have pretty much one option for where we're going to put it. That's up on top of the hill. And then we can make an assumption of like, these are the services we need, this is the size that we would need it for a separate City Hall, and then we can have that conversation separately. If we're talking about keeping City Hall down here, which I'm not sure we are anymore, then we can have the conversation about the design that we have here and compare that to other options of what we have. So what I'm trying to get out is like, where are we going with this conversation as far as like, let's put some definition on it so that we can actually have a conversation about something we can make a decision on.
Well, I think it would be worthwhile. I think the liquor store needs, I mean, again, from all the conversations we've had and the data and the information that we got and why we made the decision to keep it downtown, not on top of the hill, was, can we have that conversation, you know, with Johnson's or with?
Well, at what point would it be useful to you? I think it's going to take more than a conversation. You're going to need to have a concept like this that shows that's a viable option and an idea of what it might cost before I think you can really say, yeah, let's look at that option.
I think we have.
Well,
I think it's worth at least asking. I mean, just even the first question you just said, is it even an option?
because if it's not an I mean, if they're like, well, they maybe, who knows? I have no idea what their whatever their
Plans are.
plan is, right? And if they have other plans that isn't potentially selling the business, then, I mean, ask that question, because I think that based on, we know what the numbers are for square footage of this building for the liquor store, right? We know what the square footage is at Johnson's. I mean, in a matter of 10 minutes, you could figure out what that is. And see like, oh, man, that's way too small for what they're trying to plug in, what the liquor representative, the liquor store guy that gave us that long spiel that night, told us we should have, to be in that sweet spot of like expanding but not over expanding. And so, to me, if we have that, maybe there's interest or absolutely no interest. Like if there's maybe some interest, then okay, like what does that mean? Like what would that take to rehab that particular space, knowing that it has commercial refrigeration, it has many of the things, right, that we would look for. And then it sure seems like, okay, well now we can just okay, so that has to happen and that can happen in its own way. And then we look at what do we do with City Hall, and we can, and really bathrooms, right? So then now we're eliminating one thing. We're not building necessarily 3 separate buildings, right? We'd be rehabbing a building and building a bathroom facility, or again, like Mike brought up and Tracy brought up, maybe it isn't building a new bathroom facility, but it's some sort of, like, what's this seasonal quasi solution to the public restroom situation. And then, if we're down to City Hall, we know we have land up at the old Tom's Kubota site, looking at that site, saying this is the space we need, what of that do we need then for City Hall? I mean, who knows, I mean, could be way off, but if we're now paring down to a 3,000 square foot City Hall building, that's what we need, just throwing a number out there.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, we're along, even if we use their square footage numbers, right? And we'll still probably catch flack because we're gonna spend $1 million on a new city hall building, right? But then this space would be
Open.
on the market.
Yep.
I don't know, I mean.
So for consideration's sake, the city hall offices would be in the E, the smallest design that we have here before G, or whatever the next one is. The city hall offices are just over 3,000 square feet, but city hall council chambers is, I mean, you average it out, it's gonna be about 6,000 square feet
For the whole thing.
for the whole thing.
Well, the initial proposed concept looked like 5,500 square feet for the liquor store, 1,800 for city council. What did we end up with?
1,800 for offices, I think.
Yeah, so what's the liquor store actually square footage that they're
Right now, it's
proposing?
4,100.
4,100 on,
No,
No,
it's
it's
about
existing.
6,000.
on Plan G?
Yeah, it's around
No, but like,
6,000.
you're asking for current, or you're asking?
No,
Oh,
what's the
Oh, okay.
projected future
Projected
build-out?
build-out.
6,000 square feet?
6,000.
Okay. Well, I think the whole comment about Johnson's came up because I think at that point in time, I think people were looking at, where do we put the liquor store if we want to get it up on the highway? And that name came up, and some other lot. I've got a lot. IGA's got land. There's a lot for sale on the corner of the Gunflint Trail. You know, I think that's where that came up from, you know?
Yeah.
If the liquor store went up in a more visible area, where could it be?
Well, and also it had attributes.
Oh,
already in
definitely,
place.
but
It wasn't just-
but I also have talked with, you know, when that was mentioned at some public meetings, it was like, oh, so, I didn't know my business was for sale.
Right, no, I mean.
So I'm
that's-
just saying, you know,
Yeah.
comments were made, maybe they shouldn't have been made, but, you know, if this is serious and somebody wants to pursue this, then you've got to go sit down and ask questions.
Right,
And if it's even a concept or not,
and I think that.
period.
Yeah, go, sorry.
But my whole thing too is like getting back to the liquor store. I got a lot of ideas about this, but I want to, when it's all said and done at the end of the given year, and the liquor store pays all its expenses, where does it contribute in cash, money, to the city?
Between $230,000 and $300,000.
Okay,
That's not counting the rent that it pays
That's
to the city.
counting
That
everything.
counts everything.
that's counting
Okay.
everything. That's after employees are paid and
Gotcha.
expenses are paid, okay. Because I was getting back to something that Tracy had mentioned, what the state may or may not be doing, or what's happening in other towns, you know?
Speaking of that, so when you guys did that analysis with the liquor store, because that part I didn't know about, did they give you then a number of what they thought then sales would rise to, or how that would affect the?
I think there were estimates.
I think
in
there was
but they
some
were really
projections,
cagey.
yeah.
They were really cagey about what it could happen, but they were
Yeah.
saying that if you wanted to
I would
properly
describe that
run.
guy as cagey.
Was that?
I would describe that guy as cagey.
No, I don't think so.
He was
Well, I
very
mean-
actuarial.
Very actuarial. Yes,
Oh, he was
quite-
a super dry guy,
Quite
wasn't he?
business-like.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember him now.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah, I did a lot
I
of-
thought that he had projections, but it was he
I
cautioned us
mean,
numerous times.
there's no good way to project,
No.
but.
You think that,
did-
obviously though, sorry to interrupt, but a new facility, new layout, new building,
More profit.
you're gonna see more sales. You're,
I think
unless.
that's a safe assumption in
It's-
most environments, but here we
Yeah.
have a pretty specific environment, which
Yeah.
is, we're the only
Right.
game in town,
Right.
and we already capture the traffic we're gonna capture.
True.
So if we build a new building, are more people gonna show up in it? Potentially, maybe they shop down in Duluth, that whole story, and
True.
they're gonna shop here instead. Or maybe they're gonna do that anyway, we don't
Right.
know. So.
Yeah, you don't have any your competition to steal from is 110 miles
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
away.
So it's hard to say for sure. I mean, that's a risk that we have to be willing to accept, that assumption that we're going to have growth in sales based on a new building.
But also, if it was private, if a private person were to be building a liquor store in this town, they sure would do more things in the store besides liquor, you know? So, I mean, it would be more of a viable project for that person and maybe take some of the financial burden away from the city, that's pushing this up to $6 million. Now, that's why I asked, what does it contribute to the city? 230, 300,000, well, that's quite a bit of money, and, you know, if it was to go privatized, I'm not saying that's not a suggestion I'm making, but then that's money we have to make up somewhere else, you know,
Yeah.
It's a lot of money to make up, yeah.
Yeah,
And-
that would be.
land sale
25% of
or,
our
you
levy.
know.
And I think it's, of other things, I mean, to me, that is the approach you need to take too, to do this, is treat it like any other, it's a business. How would you offer the best stuff? And you probably would offer more than liquor, and,
Right.
which Chris has talked about. It's been a few years since he talked about what they do, but
Yeah.
I agree with that. So yeah, I guess that's part of it, which is why I'm sensitive to doing this. So you've got one spot, you just mentioned a couple other options. What are the other options besides this that we need to check off the list to get us back to here?
Well, and the other thing though, that we aren't talking about, that I've heard already this week, because certain people do go on and look at our agenda, just so you know.
Well, there was.
And I had a few people come to my store and said, oh, you're gonna build that city hall, huh? I'm going, well, you know,
Yeah.
it's a topic for discussion.
There was a
Well,
WPIP story.
how the heck can we afford that? It's like, well, that's part of the
Yeah.
process, you know. How can our city of 1,300 people put out a $6 million facility? Well, we have to look at that, you know. And I think the taxpayer should be informed, you know,
What's-
of how this fits into our budget
Yeah.
and how it gets
Oh,
paid
yeah.
for.
Yep.
What's the, I had asked Kim today for the, just the revenue numbers, but what, for 2019-20 and then year-to-date for 21, but for as far as the liquor store fund goes, as I was trying to read those, I'm not sure I was tracking that bottom line. The liquor store fund, which is for this, right? Where-
But it's for anything you want it to be
It'll go
for.
towards the
Right.
construction.
It'll go towards construction, or purchase and rehab, or whatever.
But it doesn't have to
It
be
doesn't
used
have
for
to
the
be.
liquor store.
But we have been saving money
Yes.
from revenues from the liquor store for exactly this. And what's that at right now?
I'm not sure exactly. It's more than $1 million.
Yeah.
$1.2 million to $1.4 million, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess that was my point, because I also had some conversations about this, knowing that it was gonna be on the agenda, and that it isn't, obviously, we talked about this 2 or 3 years ago, or more than that probably. I feel like we've been talking about it for the 7 years that I've been on council.
Yeah, that's right.
But, yeah, just that we have been saving, like, and planning that something is going to happen. It's still just unclear what that something is.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that's, we want to do, back to the drawing board analysis of potential locations for the liquor store as a thought exercise. We also want to revisit the whole question of the project budget and how we would fund it. That's what I'm hearing. I mean, we know how to do that. We've done those things already, so we can get that to you pretty quickly, I think.
Does that summary work?
I mean,
Is there anything we're missing as far as city hall concepts?
the only caveat I'd say to that is I agree with Mike on the 1 building, 2 buildings. If we're gonna start from scratch on a new building on a raw piece of land, then I think that this is the location, and I think that we put City Hall on it. I think the idea of, you know, I'm not trying to tell anybody that their business is for sale. Again, it's
No,
just
I know.
you know what I mean? It's that has been bandied about, and
It's time
like,
to
let's find
sell
out,
it.
like, what,
Yeah.
you know, great, if it's not for sale and never gonna be, then great, awesome, okay, move on. So we can. But, but a smaller city hall, bathroom solution, and a land or building purchase with renovation, that to me is gonna do what Jay's point, highest point was of like cost and looking, I think everybody's being cognizant of what the overall cost is gonna be. And I think there is potential savings within that model or method. And it not, don't mean it's Johnson's, it could be any space that's set up that is like, yeah, no, we're done, we wanna, you guys can convert our building into a liquor store. We could look at that if those people are out there, call City Hall. And,
What's the number?
and, but if we have to do two buildings, then I think that we have to, we can not go through all the trouble of looking at potential land, which would be likely privately held, which would then come off the tax, be back in that situation.
Okay.
That's my take on it.
Just really quick question, because I'm really bad about space, back to these designs and this smallest one you have. So like compared to where we are now, how much farther do we go this way? If you put the one that's closest to what you thought was reasonable now.
I don't think it's that dramatically, that much
How does your
farther. I think that it's
footprint
just that it fills up the lot more and is much more contiguous space, but.
Yeah,
I think
it's, if you
takes-
go back to that page 11,
Page 11?
Drawing.
G on it.
Yeah, this one?
Along Broadway?
I'm going back to it now too.
So does it go this way quite a ways to where we are, from where we are now with this building?
I think that the bathrooms, which are the blue section,
Mhm.
probably extends as much as blue further that way than the building we are now. So the whole thing, starting with the liquor store, squeezing everything out and going a little further to the south,
Mhm.
and then that frontage goes. So the property line doesn't change, right? So those parking spaces that are on the far right-hand side of that
Would
drawing
exist.
are the same
Existing?
place that are the parking spaces that are there right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that driveway area is really probably that much again wider today as it is drawn in here.
There's that ambiguous huge area.
It's
right?
really terribly laid out in
Yeah.
terms of efficient use of space, but it's great for driving semi-trucks around in,
Right.
which we do a lot of.
Okay, so to redo this, we aren't pushing that way a lot, but somehow we're getting a lot bigger liquor store out of this drawing.
Yeah, we have so much space in here that's just underutilized, or
Yeah.
it's such goofy space, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like if you look at,
We have a garage over here.
Well, the liquor store is
And it's
taking
a fire
over
hall.
all of this
Yeah.
space and all that space, right?
Yeah. That's right, I always
This
forget
thing,
about the garage
right?
part.
Like if you, that one.
We have jail
that's the one
cells
we
that are
look at.
being used for
That's like,
storage.
Oh, yeah, that's just,
Lock it in.
there's so many interiors, it's just not.
Yeah, okay, thank you, that helps. I just wasn't sure how that all laid out when we got done.
So Mike, do you feel like you have an understanding of what information we're gathering? Do you have any questions for?
I've got enough, I think, to help us get to the next step. I really don't have enough to think about where we're gonna go from there, so
No, I don't
let's
think we
just do
can.
that first, shall we?
Yeah, let's do that first.
And I just want to reiterate what I mean by that is we're going to look at locations where the liquor store might go. Like Tracy said, we'll look at them and they work or they don't, and they stay on the list, or we end up back where we started here. And then we're going to talk about the project budget again, just as a refresher of how we might pay for this. That, of course, we have a plan. We've been working on it for a very long time, so let's just put it back out in front of people, and you people in particular.
That's fair.
And I will say, bathrooms, I did get a little feedback this week as well, that was at the Downtown Business Coalition meeting. Commentary was, that's not enough bathroom space. So just, not enough stalls, not enough space.
Yeah, I think this is drawn up with 3 in each one.
Yeah.
This blue.
Yeah.
Oh, good to know.
So I'll just pass that along, if you want to
Looking-
put that on the list
Look
again.
for creative solutions.
Yeah, just so it's on there.
Okay. Well, I think that sounds like we've got enough to go on for the conversation for tonight. So with that heard, we'll move on to council and staff reports. So Craig, you got anything?
for
Council staff report.
council staff reports, yeah, public utilities meeting, we met on the 3rd. And just to recap, we talked about budget and rates. And we decided to make no increase in the water rates for the upcoming year. Sewer, we did have a I believe it was a 3.2% increase. And electricity will be no increase on the utility end of it.
Can I ask a question, Craig?
Yeah.
Why did the sewer go up but not the water?
Well, part of the sewer is we have some expenses for next year that are coming up for this, for the sewer plant,
Okay.
so we need to budget for that.
Ah.
That was pretty much most of the reason. Tom was at the meeting, did a good job explaining how the sewer plant's functioning, the things we have to do. And also, that's another project in the near future that we're probably going to be putting a bunch of money into,
Mhm.
Yeah.
to do the upgrades that we need to do to it.
Hopefully, we'll be eligible for some of that.
Yeah,
federal money.
so hopefully
That's
we-
what I was thinking, the federal money, we have to keep our eyes
Yeah.
open for that.
Quickly, knock on wood.
That's real.
So I think that was, well, the increase, just in a nutshell, the budget for '21 was 678, the '22, 678,000, the budget for '22 was 700,000. So that extra 30,000 was the increase on the sewer part of it.
Cool. Anything else?
Nope. We did not have a park board meeting. That was canceled. So that's everything.
Do you have a quorum? Could you have a
I
quorum?
don't think we had a quorum. I don't know what the deal
Can't have a
was.
quorum?
I just got a
They don't
phone
have
call.
enough
They have
people?
enough people, they did not at that
Okay.
day.
We did not have.
Plus
that.
that's
I was
election
you had
day.
enough.
No, we
Oh,
didn't.
it's
have
election
it.
day?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hmm.
when they were planning on having the meeting.
Yeah.
Anton?
Yeah, we had EDA meeting. We got the kind of wrap up on the Superior National season and budgeting for '21. We kind of ran a few different scenarios on rounds from 11, 12, 13,000 rounds to see what that does for the cash flow and end of year. And they actually ended up with 14,369,
This
which
year?
is this year, which is really good. And you know, it was dry, so there wasn't a lot of rain days. People could golf if they wanted to. So that actually put things in a pretty good situation going into you know, the last couple months of the year, and then until things open up again next spring. And did a few just not, we did apply for, on behalf of the Cook County Historical Society, a community infrastructure grant through IRRR. So we're working on that. It's an infrastructure grant for their, the project they're doing up in the business park for their kind of a climatized,
right, yeah.
controlled, not exhibit, but
Yeah.
Archive
Storage.
spaces.
Oh,
Archive storage.
yeah.
that's it. Those are the words. And then we got 2 offers on lots up at the business park, both of which we sent back counter offers. So depending on how that goes, we gave Beth, who's the new director, that Marais retired, in those, if they accept our counters, she can start the process of the developer agreements and basically closing on those.
Cool.
So there's fewer and fewer left up there, which is great. And actually, we talked about with the HRA, they meet next week. Wednesday, I think, is the first day,
Okay.
first meeting. I'm gonna try and go to that because I'm interested. But one thing that we talked about at the EDA meeting was a housing study, and the idea of putting an RFP out for a housing study, because apparently those expire every certain number of years, which, and even like in grant applications or different types of things, like you can't use an outdated housing study. And the 2012, 2014, when was Northspan, Randy Lasky, that was like 12, 13, something, right?
I have no idea. I've
But
lost
that
touch.
one was basically like, oh, we need to build 30 units of
A year.
housing, single-family housing every year, plus this, and it's like,
Mhm.
well, that's almost a decade ago, so we're probably, let's see, 25 times 10, 250 houses behind, minus the 10 that the EDA did. I mean, there's a few things that are happening, but it's like, I was trying to not be like, I think you should do this, but I think we should find out like what those numbers are. Like if
Right.
they're gonna charge
Yeah.
$35,000, that seems crazy when we have information that, I don't know how much of it's changed, but I did ask also for Beth to reach out to you, or at least go on the city's site with the housing study that we did as far as like how we updated our zoning.
Right.
Because I think there was a lot of good information on there.
We did a lot of data gathering. I think it's a good idea for you to scope what you mean by housing study, because it can really mean a lot of different things.
Well, I think the 2012, the one from Northspan was a workforce housing study.
Correct.
And so what they're saying is just a straight up housing. And so again, it's like, what does that mean? Does that mean inventory? Does that mean need? Is that both? Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I just said it might be worthwhile because that's last year, right? 2 years ago. We finally got through it last year, right? But we started that 2 years ago,
I would say, yeah, maybe
something like
3.
that. So
It took us 2 years to do it,
It
so
took
it
us
must have
2
been
years to
3
do
years
it.
ago we
Yeah.
started, but there's a lot of good data and it hasn't changed that much.
So I'd said that could be if that's there and it helps,
Yeah.
even if that just gets passed along to whoever
Yeah.
ends up bringing stuff in, like that information's on the city website and could help.
Mhm.
Those were the kind of high points of that. That's all I have.
Okay.
I have a question. How many lots are left in the business part?
I think if you
I
count,
don't-
there's like the lower two below the Gunflint, right above the county garage. So that counts as 2. And then there's a couple below Como, which I think
Okay.
I think we sold them for $1 to a,
Yeah.
but that didn't happen
Yeah,
for
because
a,
maybe the assisted
for
living.
assisted living.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And there's 2, those are right above where Hamilton Housing did their one house there. So if you count those 4, which they're basically all wet, as far as I know.
Right.
There's, I think, if you count those, I think there's 10 left. And they're all kind of smaller ones. There's not, I don't even think it's that much, actually. We actually, I don't have the map with me, it's in my car. We had it in front of us, like all the sold ones, the pending, and what was remaining, and there's not as many.
Okay,
Green,
it started
that's
out
great.
being, how many total lots was?
30,
30?
33,
30,
something like that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the infrastructure development up there, that was, how much time is left on that?
On the bonding?
How many years do we got left on the debt payment?
Yeah. Wasn't that like 1.4 million or something like that?
Oh, I'm not sure how much is left on the.
I mean, no, I mean
I'd have to look.
originally
657.
is
Does
left.
that sound right? Because it's in our financials.
Okay. So when a lot is sold, does all that money come back to the city or
No.
we're,
No, we collect
We're
a
getting-
special assessment and.
and then user fees from the,
But really, a lot of the money comes back to the city to be accumulated for bond payments,
right,
but it's not
taxes?
enough.
Okay, all right, I was just concerned about where that, you know, when all those lots get sold, and where do we sit on that? I mean.
Yeah, we're not counting on those lots creating income without selling. I think that if they were all sold tomorrow for $1, that would be better off for us. I mean, that was the assessment that we did, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, that's not the source of income to pay the bond back, but having people up there with property, paying taxes and having jobs would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And utility bills.
And I think that's where a lot of the more like in the past 6 years, pricing kind of has come from where pricing was originally, was this idea of like, well, how close
Right.
to at least covering that special assessment portion of it, you know, to get these things onto generating taxes,
Get 'em
property
sold, yeah.
taxes, you know. And, of course, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because obviously in the past year, like, land prices are, you know, and it's the cheapest property in Cook County, as far as I'm concerned, you know. I mean, it's a great, and there's a lot of the areas if they have wetlands, they've been mitigated, if they, you know, there is, you know, storm, I talked to somebody today about it, just because there is a stormwater requirement when you're doing a project up there. And they were just questioning, well, I thought there was a stormwater plan that was done when the project was developed. I remember all the KGM stuff that happened
Mhm.
on that. And it's like, well, that's different. That was just dealing with the development of the roads.
The road and the septic.
You can't, how can you do a stormwater plan for the whole entire thing if you don't know if somebody's building a 80 by 200 foot barn or they're building a 20 by 20 little shop? You know, you can't do it. You have to do it parcel by parcel. And then that stormwater plan for each parcel can't negatively impact the overall stormwater plan for the site that was done back when it was developed. So,
Okay.
anyway.
Thanks.
Cool. All right, thank you. Tracy? I had a post-board meeting. That was actually, I think, the Thursday after our last meeting. What we did for that was we went through, we were working our way through the protocols that go into the complaints. So the way that those policies have been written hasn't been looked at for a long time. And a lot of times, the way that the policies are processed is by the chief commanding officer of an organization. And so a lot of the people on the board thought that isn't maybe not the best way for the guy who hired the person to do the job, being the person who deals with all the complaints. And so there's some work going on about how we can tear those things apart and have a little bit more objective eyes fall on the complaints themselves. A lot of those complaints do come to the post board itself. We also took a step for a really interesting precedent as far as having Native law enforcement officers have their experience working as a tribal officer count towards being a state law enforcement officer working for a state agency or a local agency. So that's a really interesting precedent to see coming in, and probably a lot more needs to be done as far as defining those relationships and what that experience counts for. But it was an interesting exercise to see, a very qualified officer from a tribal department really not be able to get a job with a local government department, because those two different trainings, those two different criteria don't talk to each other. Not because they're different, just because they don't talk to each other. So it was very interesting. That's all I have. Michael? Mike?
2 quick things. First off, as you probably remember, we moved one of our water wastewater employees to the electric department, pending the hire of his replacement, which we would like to now do. We've conducted an interview of a qualified candidate and would like to offer the job to Sean Smith, if if you would please be willing to make that motion.
I'll make a motion to hire John Smith for wastewater.
Sean.
Sean?
That's what I said, right?
Oh, that said John.
I said Sean.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sean?
But I'll second it if you said Sean.
I said Sean.
Okay.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
It's a good bit.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah,
Opposed?
we're all excited.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And then, secondly, we've been working on an RFP for auditing services for the 2021 financial year and are having cold feet. We'd really like to wait another year before we do this, particularly because of the significant turnover in our office. And we're doing this because this is what the council directed us to do, and so we'll continue with our efforts if you would like us to. But we'd like to spend one more year with the same auditing crew, just for efficiency's sake, if we can.
I don't, it doesn't matter to me. The reason we were doing that in the first place was so that we could see if we could, A, get a better price from someone else, and which we're not going to get, and B, because practice, after a certain number of years, there is a certain level of familiarity that happens with the auditing organization and the organization they're auditing. And so for getting another set of eyes on the
Yeah,
organization.
the efficiency is a good thing and a bad thing,
Right.
Yep.
so.
So I thought that last year, the auditing firm that we use, that they gave us some really constructive feedback. That were things that some of them we knew, some of them we didn't really think much about. So I think they're doing a fine job. I also acknowledge the short-staffedness of our staff in this time. So I think it's fine. I don't know what you guys think.
I don't have any
Just
super thoughts, but a
don't let it happen
question.
again.
I'm just curious, so with shortage of staff, you're just thinking the audit might reflect that in the sense that maybe something isn't getting done the way it normally would get done? Or I'm just curious why that affects it.
I'm saying the level of effort involved in doing it is going to stretch us pretty thin. Just the amount of data that we have to provide to them and the interaction with them.
Got it.
We're going to benefit from the familiarity that we have with this firm. And now we're going to be adding a new employee who's intimately involved with this that we'll be training in, and there's just a lot of extra effort that we want to spend on that rather than
Sure.
building a relationship with a new accounting firm.
I'm tracking now.
Great,
I just
thank you.
didn't get it at first. Thanks.
Okay, so that's fine.
Yep.
Go ahead. Continue
you.
your efforts next year.
Okay, that's all I got.
All right. Any final comments?
Patrick?
Yeah, do we want to just confirm that the next meeting is the 30th?
Yes. Not meeting the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and that's a Tuesday, everybody, remember?
Yeah, Tuesday the 30th, is that true?
Yep. Thank you, Kim. All right, we have completed all of our work, so we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Chris.